cloud, that's where it was. Okay, all right, this is going to be module 4. And this one's recording to the cloud, which is good because I don't think the other ones that I did were, so I'm gonna have to find those. All right, so module 4, coming in and looking at that. So module 4 is trauma is an ethical issue and a moral issue. And trauma really has started to come into focus within the educational system. It's probably been in focus in healthcare and mental health, and the healthcare field and mental health, and has started to come through within education, and rightfully so. As we take a look at the whole child and really treating this is a significant issue given the amount of trauma that a lot of our students go through. Not only that, and you can take this, not only students, but also staff and adults. So just because you become an adult doesn't mean that trauma and how that affects what you do every day changes. But the main focus of this is going to be really student trauma. And so just going through, you've got some statistics in there just on the opening of that, and working on understanding really some of the devastating effects that happen within a student's life and how that can affect school. So just a brief example, and this example is one that really I deal with in my position and I see frequently. So the example, I did a high school student, but really it could be any grade. And this is just not a specific case, but just kind of general putting a lot of stuff together. But a student comes to school, gets angry, gets in a fight in the classroom with another student. It's a student's second fight. And so the policies and procedures of the district require him to be transferred off campus. After interviewing the student, you find out that his mother was beat up last night. And the police arrested her boyfriend. And so the reason why I have that in there is because there are times when the system that we have and the rules and policies and procedures that are put in place, if you want to take that from a zero tolerance perspective, don't take into account potentially the emotional issues that students are bringing into the classroom. And they're, coming through and not having an understanding of that potentially is putting a significant portion of students in a disadvantaged situation. So there's a video here that I thought was interesting regarding that. And then coming through, one of the reasons that triggered this for me is doing work within the child welfare and attendance field, and also teaching research methods and then statistics, and then also just being kind of knee deep in this with what I do in my professional career. The public counsel actually sued Compton Unified over their inability to address students that are coming to school with trauma. And so they're a very interesting case, very interesting court case going through. So CNN has a really good overview of that lawsuit. And then I've also included for you to read really the whole court decision and the case decision and where they're at. And currently they're in negotiations to see if they can settle this without going through the full court thing. So they're actually in talks right now. And I'm just talking with them, and I've talked to public counsel before related to some other issues. I think that they potentially are pretty close to having that done. So that will be interesting to see and come out. And then I have 2 articles related to stress, trauma, and learning, and then the impact of trauma on students. So for me, in looking at this perspective again, I think this is something that is coming out in the forefront. You're hearing a lot more about it currently than potentially 4 or 5 years ago. And again, from my perspective as an educational leader and a school psychologist, that rightfully so, bringing that in. You've got module 4 discussion, which again is going to follow that same format. And then data identification assessment. So this one, for whatever you chose for your equity audit, you need to be able to get access to that data. And I would like you to be able to pull qualitative and quantitative data. And so as I said in my intro, and I've covered this before, so this is a review, really, this part of it is probably going to feel very similar to the program evaluation that you did with Dr. Wise. So going through looking for quantitative data, so numbers, surveys. I don't want you to create anything for this, but use the databases that you have access to in order to pull that information. And then potentially the same thing for qualitative. Is to see what surveys you have that you have given out that you might be able to do something. If you want to do, and this is simply identifying, so it's not that you're going to have to do it, but you're going to pull it, but it doesn't have to be pulled for this. I want you to just tell me how you're going to identify it. Going through one of the things, if there is some information you think, oh, I want to survey some teachers that I work with or some staff that are around me very quickly, you can do that. We'll work with that. What I'll tell you is that within the IRB, we can do an exception to pull that data as long as you are not touching students and trying to get fresh information, like surveying students and creating a new survey. That we would not have time to go through and do that with this class because we would have to go through potentially the larger IRB process. So, but using existing data and then doing some surveys to staff for adults, we can do an exemption on that and we should be okay. And again, that's 1 to 2 pages. And again, just identifying where you're going to pull that out. For me, just an example, when I've done a version of this for Sanger Unified, I pulled the suspension data for students. And then because we had that in our system, and I actually tracked it, and then I looked at it from an ethnicity perspective. And then I used a chi-squared test to go through and see, okay, was there a significant difference between the different ethnicities and the rates of suspension and the types of suspension that they did. So that's an example for that. Again, hopefully you enjoy this module and you learn something from it.